Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're making unstuffed peppers. Well, this is a skillet casserole that is a much easier version of stuffed peppers. And we're going to get started here, and then I'll go over all the ingredients and give you some substitutes like always because of the times we're living in. I've got a pound of ground beef over here, and I'm going to cook that on medium heat. So I'm going to go ahead and get that started. And of course you have to have some peppers for stuffed peppers. Now, because these are unstuffed peppers, we're dicing our peppers up, and I have the equivalent of about 2 peppers of this size here. You can use any color bell peppers you want. I have some yellow, some orange, and some green. You could use the red, of course. I have one sitting here. This is a good recipe for if your peppers are not perfect. Right now, produce around here, it is hard to find perfect peppers, and if you're growing them at home, there's a good chance that maybe you got a bug or two, or maybe you just have a lot of them and you know you're not able to use them all, and you've got some that are getting, well, this is a good recipe for that because you can cut the bad spots out. To make stuffed peppers, you have to have perfect peppers, and we're not going to stuff them, we're just going to cook them. So dice you up a couple of bell peppers, any color. I have an onion. The onion I have chopped up here is a little bit bigger than this. It doesn't have to be a purple onion. Any onion will work. You could even use onion powder or dried minced onions, whatever. And in the winter time, if you don't have peppers in your freezer that you've grown and put in there, buy the bags of stir fry that have the peppers and the onions already in it, and you can make this recipe with that. And you can find those on sale for like $1 a bag, which is cheaper than you can get a single bell pepper for in the winter time. Of course, this winter it'll be $2 a bag, but bell peppers will probably be $4 a piece. So you can use frozen peppers in this, whether you've frozen them yourself or you've bought them. The other thing that I have is this was a cup of long grain rice that I cooked. And 1 cup of long grain rice makes 4 cups cooked. Now you could use instant rice in this if you want to. I prefer the texture of long grain rice. And if you're feeding a big family, you can make a big pot of rice ahead of time and then add it to dishes like this through the week and have it ready in no time. This is the rice. It takes 20 minutes to cook, and we are going to do a quick video on how to do stuff like cook rice and cook pasta, because I know a lot of y'all are just starting to cook and maybe you don't know how to do that. And I know some of my older cooks, so you're thinking, but you know, we have a generation of folks that have grown up without somebody in the kitchen cooking. So long grain rice is one of those things that you kind of got to know how to make it. Anyway, I've got a couple cups of shredded cheese here. You can use any flavor you want to. And I have a can of tomato soup. You can use fresh tomatoes in this if you want. If you have some canned tomatoes or canned tomato juice, you can certainly put that in this recipe. Now, if you need a substitute for the ground beef, because I know ground beef is getting expensive, you can use any ground meat, chicken, turkey, whatever. You could even use sausages or hot dogs, anything like that will work. Or if you want a meat substitute, you can use kidney beans or black beans. And this would be absolutely delicious as a vegetarian dish with beans instead of the meat, or just a cheaper alternative. I'm just going to add a little salt and pepper to my ground beef here while I'm frying it. And I have actually made this with beans before, and it's very good. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dump my peppers and my onions in here and start cooking them, because obviously my soup doesn't really need to cook and I've already cooked my rice. So go ahead and add your peppers and your onions into your ground beef. And this is a really fast dinner. especially if you already have the rice cooked. And if you don't have it cooked, you can certainly cook the rice in the time that it's going to take you to cook the peppers and the onions, and have it ready to throw in there when the beef is browned and the peppers and the onions are cooked. So you can have this on the table in 20-30 minutes tops. Kind of stir your peppers and your onions into your ground beef or your beans if you're using beans, and this really is good with the beans. So if you need a cheaper meal, that'll certainly work. Now, if you have a big old crowd to feed, a whole bunch of people, double the peppers, double the rice, and double the soup, and double the onions, and just use 1 pound of ground beef, and you can feed a crowd with this. This much will feed 4 to 6 people, especially if you did something like maybe some cornbread or some rolls, or even, gosh, I don't know, just some kind of bread with it. If you were going to have dessert too, of course, folks don't eat as much if they got dessert to look forward to. So if you wanted to do some kind of dessert with this, you definitely could feed 4 to 6 people with it. Now I'm going to add just a little bit more salt and pepper, and this is just a taste for all those peppers and onions. That is a lot of vegetables, and you can adjust it when you're done cooking it. I salted my rice when I cooked it, I always do, so I'm just adding enough here to season the peppers and the onions. I have probably had more questions about these salt and pepper boxes than I have anything I've ever made. These were a gift from my dear sister Vanessa, and because I have had so many questions about these and some of the other things that I use in the kitchen, I do now have an Amazon storefront that has all that stuff in it, and it's just stuff that's already there, but it's a place where you can find things like these. I bet you I have had, since she gave these to me, oh gosh, maybe 100, 200 people ask where they can get these. So you can find these. I'll put a link in the description box of this video, or you can go to Amazon and type in the Hillbilly Kitchen, and it should pull up that storefront. It'll say visit store, and it has these, this sign. I had another sign back here, and it has that in it years ago, and it has that sign in it, and some of the other signs that I have in the kitchen, and a lot of the stuff I use, my skillets, they're on there. So you can find all that stuff there. Anyway, I'm going to stir this one more time, and I'm going to put a lid on this to kind of cook it a little bit faster. You can or you cannot, it just depends on how much time you have. But anytime you cover something that's cooking like this with a lid, it definitely cooks it faster. And you know, how much you crumble your meat up is going to depend on how many folks you're feeding. And you can cut your peppers and onions in larger pieces if you like larger chunks of the vegetables and stuff like this. Just kind of play with it and make it the way you like it. That's the good thing about cooking at home. Everything is exactly the way you like it. And we're just going to let that cook until our hamburger is completely cooked. You want to make sure if you've got meat in there, it's completely cooked. If you're using beans that are already cooked, maybe you had some leftover beans or something, you would want to let it cook until your vegetables are tender, because none of this stuff here has to cook. Keep an eye on it as it's cooking, and you know, you want to stir it, make sure your meat's not sticking to the bottom of your skillet or nothing. And you can see how much liquid is in here. Now this is not really grease, it's all the juice out of those peppers and onions. And you don't really want to get rid of all that, because that's gonna season your dish. So if you're on a really low-fat diet, you might want to cook your ground beef before you add your peppers and your onions so that you can get some of the grease out of it. We have talked before, I'm going to leave that off and let just a little bit of that cook out, because I don't want my skillet casserole to be really mushy. but we've talked before about how the grease in our food kind of helps fill us up. And as I pull this back, you can see there is some grease on the top. If you wanted to get some of that off, you certainly could, but there's not a ton. It was just a pound of ground chuck, and you could certainly use leaner meat, or like I said, the chicken or something, and it would have less fat in it. But I'm gonna let just a little bit of the liquid cook off. That's not really gonna reduce my flavor, it's just gonna reduce the amount of water in it. While we give that just another minute to cook, I want to share Hebrews 10, 24, and 25 with you. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as we see the day approaching. When times get tough like they are now, we need other Christians in our life to lift us up. And the events of the past 2 years have really emptied our churches out. Folks are not gathering in church anymore, and that is such a shame. And we're not even gathering together in small groups anymore. We're not getting together as families anymore. And I talked in a video, maybe 2 or 3 videos ago, and I said, try to find you a small group, especially if you live alone in an apartment. I know a lot of folks who are my age, or they're a little older and they're retired. You're living in like communities with, they're like permanent campgrounds in travel trailers and that kind of thing. And those are really popular around here. There are a lot of those communities right around here. Try to find a few of your close neighbors if you live alone, especially if you live in a community like that, and do dinner nights where you take turns making dinner. This would be another great recipe for those dinner nights. If you've got a group of 3, 4, 5 people that get together and you take turns making dinner, it saves you a lot of money and it gives you company, and you can encourage one another. And we really need that right now. So please find some Christians that you can assemble together with. And hopefully maybe you can find a church that you can return to and have a church home and a church family. But even if you can't find that, if you're kind of afraid to do the big group thing still, at least find you a small group and assemble together and encourage one another and love one another and do good works together. It is so important that we have that fellowship one with another, especially when times are like this. Okay, now you can see how much of the liquid is cooked out there in just that minute. My vegetables are definitely getting done. The color is changing and they get sort of translucent as they get done, and they also get tender. And you can cook them just as long as you want to, or you can leave them a little bit crunchy. Just make sure if you have ground meat in there, you get your ground meat done. But my beef is certainly all done. And you can see when I kind of pull this mixture back that there definitely is not grease just running out of it everywhere. There's pretty much no grease in it. Well, there's a little bit. So at this point, if you want to adjust the grease a little bit, you can drain it. And I've showed this trick here before too. You can take a couple of paper towels. And this is good for those of us who are not young anymore, especially if you're cooking in a heavy skillet. But even if you're not cooking in a heavy skillet, all this food weighs something, and you can just kind of soak that up with the paper towels, and you don't have to worry about dumping your dinner in the sink. I know when my kids were growing up, I lost dinner in the sink a couple of times because I'd get in a hurry and try to drain it over a can or something in the sink, and I'd end up dumping half a dinner or all of dinner in the sink, and times are definitely too tough for that now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my rice and my soup. And you could use instant rice in this if you wanted to. Just add enough to make about 4 cups of rice. And like I said, if you're cooking this with long grain rice, it's 1 cup uncooked. And you could even add your water and your long grain rice and cook it now. It's just your dinner would take you an extra 20 minutes if you didn't already have your rice pre-cooked. You could just put 2 cups of water and a cup of long grain rice in here. And I'm going to go ahead and add my soup in here. And this is going to absolutely fill my skillet full. So if you're making this for a great big crowd and you want to double everything, use a Dutch oven, because it will not fit in a skillet if you're making a great big batch. You do want to turn it down on low because there's not a whole lot of liquid in here. You saw that. And your rice and your hamburger will stick to the bottom of your skillet if you don't. I cook the vegetables and the meat kind of on about medium high, I guess. It's hard to tell on this little stove. All we're really trying to do is make sure all this stuff gets hot. And now that my rice, and well, if you just cook your rice, it'll still be hot. Mine got a little bit cool while it was sitting there waiting for me to get the video going. But I'm gonna add part of my cheese in here, about a cup of it, and then I'm gonna put about a cup on the top. And I'm using cheddar cheese. You can use, like I said, whatever you want. This would be good with some pepper jack or maybe even some mozzarella. And I'm going to stir this up in here. And you can see as I stir this up, because everything's good and hot, that cheese is starting to string in there. That's what you want. If you use different color peppers in this, it is a very pretty dish because it has all the colors from the peppers in it. Okay, got that stirred up pretty good. And everything is hot, so now what I'm going to do is just kind of spread it out. And you can see here, you know, it looks like the filling for stuffed peppers. Just easier and cheaper. I'm going to go ahead and cut my pan off. Now, if you are using a glass cooktop and some kind of skillet on your glass cooktop, you can probably go ahead and cut that off too. If you have a gas stove and you're using a thinner skillet, you might want to leave it on for just a minute, but the heat in my iron skillet and the heat in your glass cooktop would be enough to melt this cheese. And then just put the lid on it for a minute and let it sit there until the cheese melts before you serve it. Well, it's almost completely melted, but you can see there it melts. It'll take about, I don't know, maybe 5-6 minutes for it to completely melt. It will finish melting as it sits here because it was boiling, so it's very hot. You can also put this in the oven if you want to and brown the top real nice, especially if it's in the winter time. You know, that brown cheese, and just turning the oven on for a little while is nice in the winter sometimes because it knocks the chill off in the house. And it makes the kitchen smell really good before everybody comes in to eat. But it's a very simple one-pot meal. You can have dinner ready on a weeknight in just a few minutes. It doesn't take long at all. Try this one. And this winter you can try it, like I said, with the frozen peppers and onions. Makes it even easier because you don't have to cut anything up. If you've got peppers in the freezer, this is the recipe for them because you can use quite a few of them in this. I want to thank y'all so much for joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen. If you have not already, please don't forget to click like and subscribe before you leave. Share our videos with your friends. And until next time, remember to put God first.